Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. This is podcast 24. I've had a lot of requests to go over Google Ventures Design Sprint from a new overview perspective, so that's what I'm doing for you today. I am your innovator. This is Nevada Smith, and you're listening to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. Okay, welcome back to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. As the intro said, I am your innovator. This is Nevada Smith, and today we're going to take a look at the product design sprint from Google Ventures. I've got a lot of requests coming in to deal with this particular subject. I've got each of the individual days actually mapped out in other podcasts. So today I'm going to give you an overview and try to get through it in under 20 minutes. So I'm going to be going very quickly. Please leave messages below. You can always follow me on Twitter at InnovateExcel. I also started Anchor podcast as well. That's giving you tips and tricks about the innovation process and how to change your organization from a standard waterfall approach or an agile approach into an innovation culture, one that continually looks for customer value. So that's where we're going to start. And this series here is really around why are we driving towards customer value? And of course, that is because we want to get back actual feedback from our actual customers to know whether or not we're on the right track. We don't want to be spending tons and tons of money. And the innovation process that is built upon the design sprint is a great way of doing that in under 5 days. So let's start out with the overview really quickly. And we'll take a look at the first section here, which is an overview of the actual process itself and what a design sprint actually is. And as you can see here, the design sprint process is all about trying to get information back on your idea before you've actually gone through all of the effort of building and launching a particular product. So this is all about getting that feedback loop. We can see that feedback loop is in here. Get the idea out there, learn as fast as possible. Rather than launching the product to find out that you failed, let's find out about failure up front before we spend a lot of money. Or even better, let's find out about this is actually something the market wants and we were onto something, and you know what? They've given us a bunch of information about what we should actually be building. So that's a little bit about, from an overview perspective, really what we're looking at here, design sprint. And again, Google Ventures' design sprint is really this time box design cycle that's completed with collaborativeness between the individuals and getting real user input from the customer market. So it focuses here on getting validation and maximizing the chances of a desirable product out to the market. It's really looking at the flexibility and able to adapt to teams of different needs. And it's really about coming back and getting measurable. So the number of good ideas generated, getting team alignment, forwarding from a strategic level the company direction, and then halting a product that's not actually got a market available for it. We can continue to look at some of the high-level overview about what the process includes, and there's a 5-day process, and really we start off with an understanding about the insights from a user perspective. We're going to then diverge and come up with a bunch of different solutions to solve those customer insights, those customer persona challenges. And then we're going to converge on day 3 and pick an actual topic idea that we're going to move forward with. Day 4 is a full day of prototyping, and then we're taking it out to the market and getting that customer feedback by actually testing it on actual users. So let's look at the first day. The first day starts on a Monday. You want to pull aside enough days to do this. This is a 5-day process, so you want to make sure you've got everybody lined up for the 5 days. And the first process is phase 1, and it is a mapping exercise. And it's broken down into these key sets. We start at 10 o'clock in the morning. We try to finish by 5 o'clock at the end of the day. And we're really starting with the end in mind. We know that we don't know everything, and this is an opportunity for us to reframe the problems. So the first thing we're doing is activity 1, and it starts at 10 o'clock. And you want to introduce the actual system that you're going through, what's involved in this design sprint system that you're implementing, or this process that you're going through, what you're going to do, and how you're going to approach it. We introduce everybody. Sometimes I've got brand new faces in the room. I've brought people in from the rest of the organization to go ahead and do this. So this is a good time to get to know everybody. Lastly, the facilitator and the decider roles are described in detail about what they're going to do. Now, typically, I'm the facilitator in one of these things, although I do train others to be the facilitator and take you through the design process. It's important, too, to have a decider in the room, but that's not necessarily a must-have to move this forward. I have a process that we'll discuss later that actually allows our decider to actually be the group itself. So moving on, we explain the sprint, we introduce the 5-day process, and we go through some of the videos that are available online and walk people through each of the steps in the process so they get a good understanding about what the next 5 days are going to be and what they're going to be doing. Then we get into activities 4 and 5. And these are all about setting a long-term goal. So we're getting very, very optimistic. We're laying the framework out. We're talking about some of the personas that we're dealing with, and we get as optimistic as we can. And then we go on to a pessimistic mode, and we talk about what's going to stop us moving forward here. So listing out the sprint questions, what are we trying to solve? What are the roadblocks going to be? And let's deal with those as we go through this process, rather than saying we just can't do this because of A, B, and C. Let's get those out on the board. Let's get everybody heard. Next part of the process is activity 6. And going through activity 6, we're trying to make a map now. And what we want to do is keep it between 5 and 15 steps. Ideally, 8 to 12 is a real sweet spot for putting this forward. And we draw this out on the board and make a map of the customer journey, the customer going through the process of their challenge that we're trying to address here. And we want to make sure that we're focused in on that customer value. So we're putting that up on the screen. Next step we go through is taking a look at breaking for lunch here. This is where we actually get out of the room. I've talked about this on each of the individuals. It's important to get out of the room, but it's just as important to have a healthy lunch. So nothing high in carbs, no pizza. Make sure that you're eating something that's very, very healthy and light. It keeps the energy up in the room. But you're out of the room for 1 hour at this point. Moving on to activity 7, we're taking a look at the exercise here where we're looking for some feedback from our experts. So this is where we've lined up our subject matter experts, our executive teams, our leaders of the organizations to come in, and we're going ahead and updating the long-term goal based upon the questions that we're asking those individuals, again, with a focus on that customer value. What are we trying to solve? And we're mapping that and updating our customer map as we go along. Next thing, we move on to the next part of the activities here, and we're talking about changing the role of the group. So as the group has these challenges come up, we change those challenges to what we call HMW. So how might we? And we take everything down as a how might we note. So someone says this is going to be a problem. We reframe that, and we reframe it as an opportunity by rewriting the problem statement as a how might we, let's say, solve the fact that we need to spin up a box, and in this organization it takes 6 months to spin up a box so we can actually get this product out. So framing it like that gives your brain opening up and allowing you to think about solutions to those particular opportunities. So it's very important to stay positive and make sure that those problems are reframed as opportunities. A lot of these problems have already been written down as we got the pessimistic mode, and now we've reframed those so we can continue to identify innovative ways to solve those customer challenges that we're after and up against. Activity 9 is really about taking these how might we notes and making sure that we're dealing with a group of these notes that are going to be achievable within this short period of time that we're doing. So we don't want to answer every question. So we have a parking lot and we move some things across to those parking lots so that we don't get stuck on a particular issue that we're solving. We're either going to deal with it or we're not going to deal with it. And then we're going to go ahead and vote on those ideas. I typically use, and if you look down at my headshot right now, I use these little values here, these what are they called? They're dollar values, and I give everyone a sheet of these, and this is what we use for voting, and this helps us put the winners back on the map. So at the how might we, everybody gets basically a $3, a $2, $1. They get some blue tickets as well, and we can utilize those things to prioritize based on the team. And this is what I was saying before. We don't necessarily need a decider in the room, because the decider is based on the number of dollars that a particular idea or a particular how might we note actually goes on. So we take the top 5 or so of those how might we's and we put them on the customer map. So moving on to the next set of activities here. This is activity 11, and this is really about making sure that we have the right customer that we're trying to address here. So we're both selecting a customer, the customer value that we're trying to deal with, and we're also selecting a product or something that we can build to take that towards the target, whether it's a niche market, whether it's a particular customer value or a challenge that we're trying to solve for that particular customer. That's where we make the call. Again, the voting has actually done this for you, so you're going to know which are the best how might we solutions that are going to go up on the board there, and that's, again, very, very important from that perspective. We can actually deal with that and put it on the board, and everybody's on the right page. So that's the end of Monday, and now we're going to move on to Tuesday, which is really taking the sketching approach to try to remix and improve. We want to make sure that everybody is sketching in the room. I do an activity where I take you through a cartoon exercise, and that's going to break down the barriers to say you can't draw. And then we're trying to get very, very specific in how we're solving a problem. So let's just stay away from the abstract and get concrete with what we're doing. And we're trying to work alone for the most part, although we could break up into groups of 2. So at 10 a.m., where we start the activity 1, and this is really the lightning demo. So those individuals in the room are going to go ahead and show us what they've done in the past. Some of the solutions that might solve these problems that exist in other industries are important. So we go through these 3-minute exercises where each individual in the room actually presents a lightning demo of existing solutions that exist in the market. Activity 2 is either making the decision to group up and start designing those particular sketches that we're dealing with, or have everybody do those sketches independently. And you've got to make a decision which direction you want to go. Both work well. Typically, if you've got talented individuals that from an artistic perspective, it helps, but it's not necessary. Normally, I partner those guys up with my technologists so that they can get those ideas down on paper as fast as possible. So, of course, we break for lunch again. Again, keep it fresh, keep it good. Get out of the room for the hour. Make sure you use that time. Take a walk. I like to, if the weather's good, get out to a picnic table and bring in a healthy lunch. Again, salads and proteins are really, really good. Stay away from the carbohydrates to keep the energy level up. After we come back from lunch, we're going to go into activity 4 and this activity 3, and this is the 4-step sketch approach, and this is creating the sketches that we're going to utilize for tomorrow. And you've either teamed up at this point or you've gone ahead and you've broken out into individuals here. But we take a set of notes to solve those particular problems on the map that we've got on the board now. We spend 20 minutes doing that. Everybody's walking around the room looking at the stuff that's on the boards, looking at the notes that are on the board, looking at the how might we's that are on the map itself, and coming up with exactly how they want to start to think about those things. Next thing, they're privately jotting down some rough ideas about how they're going to solve those customer challenges that are up there on the board. They're going to go ahead and circle that. I'm using an egg timer at that point to make sure that everybody stays on track. So 20 minutes for the notes, 20 minutes for the ideas. And Crazy Eights is a real fun exercise where we fold a sheet of paper up into 8 little squares. And then for 1 minute for each of those, we actually draw a solution based on the ideas that we came up with. This is 8 minutes. This is 1 minute per sketch. Again, I'm using some sort of timing device to tell people to move on. I typically run this for about 12 minutes. I give people a little bit extra time to move on to the next section here. After you've gone through a few of these sessions, they're going to feel the pressure of getting that particular cell output from a cartoon customer journey perspective, and they're going to feel how they need to move forward and how they've only got 1 minute left. So typically I'm using a iPad here to make people move on when they need to move on. The last 30 to 90 minutes, and typically I'm spending closer to the 90 minutes here, is solutioning out a particular problem. So I typically say to an individual, use post-it notes at this point, try to keep it self-explanatory, use one color for the actual sketch itself and another color for the particular features that are on that sketch. Each individual does this individually. They have to keep it self-explanatory because the goal here is to provide a solution for those customer values that are are going to make the end user actually figure out how to do this with very, very little education. When we come back and actually look at these on the next day, as a facilitator, I'm going to be going through these. And again, if there's big gaps in it, then it's not going to be self-explanatory. It's going to be hard to understand. And typically that's where you've got a solution to a problem that's not the best possible solution. Ugly is okay. That's really about, you don't necessarily need to be an artist. Typically, I do have an artist in the room, so I do utilize that artist on the next day once we bring everything together. Words do matter, so keep them short, keep them self-explanatory and put it there, and then come up with a catchy title or a catchy phrase for the particular solution that you're putting forward. So that's it for day 2, which is typically on a Tuesday. The next day is the deciding day. And the key things to look at from the deciding day is any tough decisions we can put off to the side. We're going to defer small decisions until tomorrow and utilize the voting exercise with the dollars to make sure that we selected exactly what it is we want. We want to move forward with from a priority perspective. And again, we're working with what we have. We don't come up with brand new things today. We're trying to stay within the framework that we've already put forward. Again, the day starts at 10. It tries to end by 5 o'clock. We start at 10 a.m. on the dot. So activity 1 is really about choosing the strongest solutions. And how do we do that? We go through this exercise here. We put all of the solutions that were drawn yesterday up on a wall, and again, each individual has drawn and put some solutions to things, and nobody knows who did what. So it's really important to keep it anonymous, and we put it up on the wall. Then we go through this heat map exercise. Typically, I don't follow the straw poll or the super vote. The super vote would be where you have the decider come in. The straw poll would be to select the best idea there. Typically, what I do is I go through 2 heat map exercises, again using these yard sale dollars to identify the best parts of the solutions. Then I go through a speed critique. And the speed critique, I'm not sure if I've got I may have a particular slide on this, but the speed critique is really myself as the leader or the facilitator now trying to explain what I'm seeing on the board. That lasts about 3 minutes, and at the end of those 3 minutes, I then say, okay, can the person who did this come forward, and did I miss anything? And that gives us an opportunity to see if there are any gaps or anything that's obvious that doesn't really come out in the particular solution, so we can record that and put that down, because it may be the best idea, it just might be missing something to make it self-explanatory, and we give that opportunity to the individual. Keep that section to 1 minute after I've done my 3 minute on that particular one, and then we move on to the next one. At the end of it, we come back again, and I now utilize these blue dots, and you can see it down in the bottom corner, and those blue dots are for an availability to select the best portions of the ideas. Typically, what I see at this point is some small changes come through, some small ideas are now moved to the top of the stack. You can either use the blue dots and you've got 3 votes to select the best ones, or you can go back and do another voting exercise and add more of the small 75 cents, the 25 cents, and the 50 cent ones. Those work well too. And then you re-add them up and you take the cells with the highest value to move forward. So that's really it for that particular activity. Activity 2, we're now taking the particular solution that we've got. We've identified those winners, and then we're moving off those good ideas that weren't quite making it. We're moving them off to the parking lot to deal with either at a later stage or just record the fact that we went through that particular exercise. Moving on to the next activity, we either do a rumble at this point or we do an all-in-one, and this is where you're merging the winners together and resolving the conflicts between them. So because you might have picked cells from each individual idea, you've got to come up with a way to make that customer journey, make that flow smoothly, right? So as you're moving between those particular features that each individual has come up with, you've got to make sure it's nice and smooth and it's actual self-explanatory to the individual user. And so you use this time to resolve those conflicts and resolve those things, especially if there's 2 pages that have got the same information on them and one's got a little bit more. How do you merge those things together? How do you deal with those particular transitions between those screens? The next part of the activities that we go through is we come up with a fake brand name. So this is very important because as you're presenting it to the individual customers that are coming in on a Friday, you want to make sure that you've got real good brand names so they actually think it's a real product, because they're going to be utilizing the prototype, and that's important to make them feel like that they've got that particular product there. So we come up with really good catchy names here, and we do a note and vote, which is using post-it notes, and then we go through the exercise again of putting the dollars on it, and the ones with the highest votes go up. Or you can just raise your hands and say which particular brand name do you like the best, and go through that exercise. So moving on, again, lunch. This is the first time we're actually showing a salad bowl. This is very important. Again, I'm not going to go through that, but keep it healthy. Keeps the energy up. Activity 5 is about making a storyboard. Making the storyboard is so important. And it is so that you can actually implement these ideas. Again, keep the storyboard at this point to 8 to 12 cells. That's the ideal sweet spot. Do not go over 15 cells, and these cells are going to represent the customer journey as they're going through and interacting with the particular product. And again, you're going to be getting that feedback on Friday. So it's, again, they've got to walk through from a start to finish. You identify the incoming cell, how they're going to find out about the product, how do they get first engaged with the product, and then you flow it out all the way through to where the end product actually solves the customer value that you were targeting. So you draw a grid on the screen, you choose an opening scene, and you fill out the storyboard. Again, even though I've got a grid, I typically use the post-it notes here because there's going to be a lot of backwards and forwards about the ordering of these things. So draw all these things on a post-it note and get them up on the storyboard. So that's the end of the decide phase, and now we're going to move on to the prototyping phase. So your technical people in this room now are going to go ahead and help you build the prototype out. Use an online prototyping tool. I typically use something that can be downloaded to an iOS or an Android device. I'm typically focused on the new technology, so the mobile applications, although I do web stuff as well, and those web tools that give you prototypes are always good too. Now, know that the prototypes could be as simple as utilizing Keynote that gives you lots of interactive capabilities, but you need a Keynote expert there. I have seen them put together on PowerPoint presentations and exported as movies, but typically the best way to go through this is to allow it to be interactive with the end user that you're dealing with. Know that the prototypes are disposable, so it doesn't have to be pixel perfect. And it's built just to get that learn feedback. So when we started off this session, we talked about getting the learn feedback in as early as possible, and that's the whole key of this particular prototype, is to get it in front of real customers and get that real feedback. So again, Goldilocks quality is number one, and it's just enough quality to invoke an honest reaction from the customer, but making sure that it feels real. Again, we're running from 10 a.m. through to 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And so we stay on this strict time budget that we can do. So at this point, we should have already identified our customers earlier on in the week. We've reminded those customers to show up from the Friday test, and we've created incentives for the customers, such as a $75 or $100 gift card for them to come in. We now write the interview script as well, so we want to make sure we're dividing and conquer to do that type of thing so that we're ready for Friday itself. So at 10 a.m. in the morning, we're going to start with Activity 1, and Activity 1 is about picking the right tools. I talked about those. They've got to be able to build this prototype very fast. It's got to be reliable. It can't crash during the day. So pick one of the online tools. There's tons of available out there. Play around with a few before you start your design sprint. Find one that's easy with drag and drop capabilities that give you the look and feel that you're after. Use that, get it out, make sure that everybody's stitching it together correctly. So after you've picked that, again, we talked about the divide and conquer. Who's going to build which cells? Who's going to build which screens? Who's going to be the writer? Who's going to go out and collect the assets that you're going to put on there, the iconography that you want to be dealing with, and who's actually going to be the interviewer? Typically, I'm doing the interviews because I've got a lot of experience with that, but you may pick someone else in the room that's going to be the interviewer, and they're going to work on those interview questions and move it forward. So it's really about dividing and conquer here. I'm typically got a couple of people actually building these prototypes, but I've got other people out there pulling those assets together and writing the actual script as you're going through as well. So lots of important stuff's going on there. So the next part of the activity is taking a break for lunch again. We're taking 1 hour, or we're getting out of the room, we're refreshing, and we're keeping it nice and healthy. After lunch, we come back and we start the actual prototyping exercise. So now we've gone into the tool and we start to prototype, and we make sure that we do it. We put that customer value forward. We're going back off the storyboard that we've got, so we've got a good idea about what it is that we're creating. Try to keep this part of the session to 2 to 3 hours. If it goes 4, it may well do. Then it's important to make sure that you try to keep it as short as possible so you can get the best Goldilocks quality you can out there. So, of course, if each individual's been going out and pulling in iconography and doing different screens, then you want to make sure that you're being able to stitch it together, and you want to check for quality and unity among pieces. You want each screen to feel like it's the same application. So make sure that you keep that quality and that unity at the forefront here. It's got to feel seamless and integrative. So any of the clicking areas on the screen, make sure that all those buttons look the same, all the colors are the same, all those other things are the same. So activity 5 is really now about doing trial runs. So you're going through, you're trying to fix any of the bugs that are in the system that you've gone through, the touching areas on the screen, the things that look like touch that shouldn't be, that aren't touch, should say that this feature is not available if you're showing those types of details. But you want to have a good experience for the end user. They want to feel like they're using a real application. So make sure that anything that they can touch actually does what they would expect it to do. So trial runs are important to make sure you've gone through that and fixed all the particular bugs in the system. So finish up the prototype at the end of the day. Take as much time as you can to make sure it's polished and ready to go for the next day. So that takes us through the prototyping day, which is most exciting for our IT organization. Now we're going on to the testing organization. So how do we do the testing? We've already identified 5 or 6 individuals that we bring into the organization. We set up some rooms, and we're going to watch this together, and I'll talk you through this. And we want to make sure at the end of this we've got a winner every single time, so we've selected that. So we've created a makeshift research lab and a comfortable environment. As those interviewers are coming in, the interviewees are coming in, we've invited them to a section where we make sure we've got snacks and drinks for them to feel comfortable, and we want them in an environment that's available to do that. So how do we create the research lab? It's really simple. It's 2 rooms set up. You have video cameras in the interview room. You have 1 video camera on the individual's face. You have another video camera that's actually looking at the device that they're working with. Typically, blue painter's tape is the only instruction that I give the individual to keep the particular device within the blue painter's tape, because, of course, that's where the video is picking it up. And in the second room, all of the rest of the people that were involved in the design sprint are actually watching the interview as it's taking place, and they've got post-it notes, and they're looking at the reactions on the face. They're looking at what the user's trying to click on, and they're making notes and putting those up on the screen. So this is a little bit about the 5-act interview. I would say make sure you're making it very, very friendly. Make sure your questions are open-ended, so no yes, no questions, none of that. You want to make sure the questions are going to dig out the information that you're looking for from a customer value perspective. So try not to lead it. So there's a lot of information out there on the internet about how to do these interviews and do them correctly. Definitely study up on this stuff if you're brand new to it. It's very, very important. So once the individual's actually been welcomed into the room, go ahead and introduce the prototype. Talk a little bit about what you're expecting from the interview, so it puts them on the right framework, and then make sure that they understand that they need to be talking out loud, telling us what they're doing, what they're thinking, how they're feeling, which is really important. You do want to task them and nudge them where necessary if they're moving in the wrong direction, but the most thing you want to make sure is allow them to play with the prototype and allow it to unfold naturally. If you've spent 4 days on this particular prototype, maybe you kind of figure out the path and the direction it needs to go. So, and then use them as just seen this. So it's got to be self-explanatory again. So there shouldn't be a lot of that going on, but it may be necessary to recorrect them where necessary. Make sure that if you're doing that type of thing, ask them, why they kind of got off track, or how they got off track, or what would be a better approach, or what they were expecting, or try to dig in and find out what's going on, what were the thought processes behind, and what got them off. The last thing is all of those interview questions, all of the facial recognition, or the face when you were in the other room looking at the faces, and all the notes that came out of that. You want to make sure that you've debriefed the entire team. So before each interview, draw a grid on the board, have the name of the interviewer at each one of those things, and make sure that you take the notes as you're watching from the other room. Stick the notes up on the board and then discuss them between each of the interviews to make sure you get any further insights before it's too late. Try to record those sessions if possible as well. Make sure you get the releases as necessary for those. So now you're looking at the patterns that have come back. So what were the commonalities between each one of these users? Were you on the right track? Did the customer give you the feedback that you were looking for and giving you something to do better with the application or not? Those are important patterns that you're going to be identifying here at this point. At the end of the day, you're going to decide what you want to do from here. So typically there's 3 ways to go. Number 1 is to go ahead and say, yep, this is a great product and we're going to move forward with it. So move it into the IT organization to kick it off. Typically, I kick that off with a 1-day session, a 1-day workshop that takes you to an acceleration workshop that gets the entire IT organization and the SMEs and the BAs and everybody on the same page to move forward. Another way to go might be we weren't quite right, but we're definitely onto a great idea, so take it through another design sprint. The third way may be, you know what, there's no customer value here. There's nothing that was positive back from these individuals, so we're going to actually shelve this one and pick something else moving forward. So guys, that was a sprint wrap up. Now I know I was trying to get it under 20 minutes. It actually took 30. I again appreciate bringing these things to you. Thanks for the comments on the previous ones that said you wanted this. I'll try to put out as much of this content as I can to keep you innovating and changing your culture at your organizations, and make sure that you're staying with it. So I'm your innovator. This is Innovating a Game Changer podcast, and I've enjoyed bringing this to you.